Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. Now, if you have any questions throughout the session, if you're joining us on Zoom, just look at the top of the bottom of your screen, wherever your Zoom controls are, you see a little button that says Q&A. Click on that, type in your question. We'll get to those at the end. If you're watching on YouTube, same deal. If you're watching on the live stream anyways, just use the live chat. Otherwise, you can leave a comment, and I'll get to those as I can as well. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's National Diagnostic Technical Trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep with Snap-on, so I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. Then before that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so worked in a dealership, and I guess over time, became the default diag guy in the shop. So I always had the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher cars that would come into my way. And before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous French and jobs. Been a little over 25 years under hood experience for me. So our topic today is continuing with our OEM specific training series we've been doing this year. And tonight it is BMW. So we're going to go through a little bit of history on the brand, top sales, vehicles, top models, top codes, top problems with the vehicles, straight from techs who work on these vehicles. So we'll try and give you a lot of that real world experience that maybe you don't have. Maybe you don't work on BMW very often or at all. But what do you do when that BMW does roll into your shop? You might want to know some of the more common problems that they might have, and there could be a common solution to that common problem. I always remember working, especially working at a dealership, you're working on the same brands over and over and over and over and over again. And then you learn, okay, when it has this code, it's usually this. Let's check these three things. Okay, it must be that. Or when it has this strange problem, check this bolt over here. It's the things like that that we're trying to get across to you all, so that you can, just be a little bit better prepared if a car comes in that's not one that's in your normal wheelhouse. Even if it is in your normal wheelhouse, you might not know some of these tips and tricks. So that's this series. So let's carry on. First, we'll start with some history. And as most automobile manufacturers we've been talking about throughout this series, early 1900s is when they were founded. So 1910 by Gustav Otto, and they started by manufacturing aircraft engines. So that's actually a common theme you'll find as we go through this as well. They produced their first motorcycle in 1923, so they actually started with motorcycles first. They still do have motorcycles today. They became an automobile manufacturer in 1928. And then, of course, there was that issue of World War II that happened. Pardon me. So after World War II, they were banned from manufacturing automobiles or aircraft after World War II. So to get by in the interim, made pots, pans, and bicycles in order to keep the money coming in. You're still doing metal work, I guess, and bicycles. So restarted their motorcycle manufacturing 3 years after that, 1948, and then they restarted building automobiles in 1952. So some stuff. Quite a long history of that, and we're not going to get into a lot of the interim models. We'll really talk about the ones that are present today that we see. So the 5 Series was introduced in 1972. The 3 Series was 1975. The 6 Series was 1976. And the 7 Series was introduced in 1978. And then, of course, the X Series and a couple of the other ones are way more recent than that. They also own Mini and Rolls-Royce. So if you work on some of those, it's also a BMW if you think about it that way. Kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, if I would think of it that way. Mini's a lot smaller. A Rolls-Royce, it's one of those big fancy cars. So, yeah, so they are a part of a conglomerate. And they own a couple different brands. So, of course, based in Germany. Top models here. So, sales volume wise, 2013 to 2023, so a 10-year span. And we can see the sales count here. So we got X5 number 1 with 591,000 units, all the way down to the 2 Series with 94,000 units, 7 Series even 95. So it's under 100,000 units. That's less than 10,000 on average a year. Total of 3 million vehicles over the course of that 10 years. So about 300,000 vehicles a year. No slouch, but definitely not the top by any means either. Some representative models that we'll take out of that. So, of course, the number one seller was the X5, and one of the top sales years over that 10-year span was 2017. So, we'll look at the 2017 X5 here. It is the third generation of the X5. Was offered that year with a 2-liter, 3-liter gas, a 3-liter diesel, and a 4.4-liter gas. There's also a 2-liter turbo plug-in hybrid powertrain available. And on the non-hybrid vehicles, it would be an 8-speed automatic transmission, and that's all you get. So you have anything you want as long as it's an 8-speed automatic. Of course, on the hybrids have different transmission type powertrain. Another one is fairly common when it comes to BMW's range, is as far as seeing them out on the road, right? It's a 3 Series. So 2015 was one of the higher watermarks there for sales. So it is the 6th generation of the 3 Series, offered with a 2-liter gas, a 2-liter diesel, and a 3-liter gas engine that year. There's an 8-speed automatic transmission, also a 6-speed manual transmission available. So manuals are kind of the outlier nowadays. If you see out there, they're pretty hard to find a manual transmission offered out there, because automatic transmission technology has gotten so good. But still, some people like having that manual transmission, so it is still offered on some. And then we have the 2016 7 Series. So that wasn't that high up on the list. Actually, it was the second from the bottom. Less than 100,000 sold that year, but this is one of their higher end uh, series that they have. It's always got the fancy technology in it, and it seems like they try it out in here first, and then it ends up trickling down into the other series. Like, I don't know if you've seen some of the commercials and advertising lately over the last year or so on the 7 Series. It's got this massive video panel on the back for the back passengers and stuff. So that's really test out all the fancy bells and whistles, I guess, if you think of it that way. But this was the 6th generation of the 7 Series. Remember, it started back in the 70s. 3-liter, 4.4, and 6-liter engines. So it's also offered with the bigger engine sizes, V6s and V8s. 8-speed automatic transmission, and this was 2016 was the highest North America and Europe sales volume year, and they were pretty close to each other, about 13,000 sales in each market respectively. So they were pretty even with each other, and that was the highest year of those 10 years, and it's guessing it's probably due to the price range, right? It's the higher the price goes, the smaller the market is. So that was 13,000 a year. So some common issues that we can find, and we find this through a multitude of information sources. A lot of it has to do with the information that we have, that we see out there, coming in from repair orders and scan tools and such. And then some of it's also with technician input and things of that nature. So many occurrences of misfires. We're actually going to talk through a couple of these as we go. Some EVAP issues as well. I think that's fairly common across a lot of the brands we've even just talked about, the 3 brands we've gone through so far this year. EVAP's been a problem with a lot of them. It just kind of seems like just a squirrely little issue there. Some intake system issues, turbo problems, intake manifold problems, things like that. And thermostat and cooling system issues. They actually have an electronic thermostat in there. And if you watched my class on electronic thermostats, there's like a little heater in here, and they can go bad. So a lot of codes for that in there, as we'll see as we go through the different common codes. So let's talk about common codes. Now, this is common codes based on our scan tools and what people are working on. And we can see there's a fair amount of commonality in there, at least the engine sizes, right? So the 3-liter N55 seems to be fairly common, or just 3 liters in general here. And we can see all of the codes are in the engine. Actually, there's only 9 here because we didn't have a 10th code out of the top 10. But things like throttle valve opening angle, boost pressure control, throttle valve, charge air pressure. Once again, those are all intake problems. Variable camshaft timing control. Once again, throttle valve, mixture control, variable cam control, Vanos, variable cam timing control. So a lot of that stuff, a lot of these top codes are based on a lot of the complex intake systems that they're using on this, between the intake manifold as well as the valve train. We're going to talk about that because there are a few very complex or fairly complex OEM specific features on these engines, leading us back to our valve train control there, right? So in this case, this is Vanos, and that's how they control the timing, the valve timing backwards and forwards. So that's not really exclusive. It's just kind of the way they do it and what they call it. That is exclusive to them. It's called Vanos, and it's just how it operates with oil pressure and the cam gears that advance and retard the timing of the cams. Then we have Valvetronic. So Valvetronic, what that does is it actually varies the amount and duration, the lift and duration of the valves by using a little stepper motor that's able to increase or decrease the angle of a cam as the cam shaft rides on this other cam. So it's kind of hard to see with this picture. It's a little bit of that in there, but this is a little bit better of a picture. Right, so we have the motor that's going to move this gear, and it's going to move this eccentric here, and then the camshaft rides on that, and it pushes down on the valve. Depending on where this is at in its range of travel, we can see it's all the way in over here, and it's all the way out over here. And depending on where that range of travel is, it's going to tell us how those valves are going to open. So I got a little animation here how that works. So we can see there's with it all the way out, very barely opening. Even further out, they don't open at all. And then we go in a little bit, we can see it kind of opens. And then if we go way in, they open for much longer and much deeper. And we can see how it just kind of goes back and forth. And then the actual camshaft is here. So they don't do it like Honda does, where it's like just changes cam profiles or changes the rockers that are in there. It's actually the same cam profile around, and then they just have this mechanical running off of a motor, a little electric motor in there. So to me, it seems a lot more complicated than it really needs to be because other manufacturers, like I said, just do it with oil pressure and multiple cam rockers. Subaru does that way as well. But hey, that's that BMW German engineering that we always hear so much about, right? We think we know a better way, so we're just going to make it super complicated. A lot of failures in there though. And then we have two different variable runner intakes that BMW uses as well, which once again gives us more failure points, more chances for codes on that. Well, you see, we have three different pathways really. So we have the regular pathway that brings us through into all the cylinders. We also have these other ones that allow air to kind of bypass in some places. Actually, in this case, using scavenging, kind of coming back and rerouting it in mid-range. And then on the high RPMs, it actually takes it and kind of reroutes it both ways. Everything's wide open, and it allows the torque to vary depending on the load. So if I need more low end torque, it's going to do it this way. If I need mid-range torque, it's going to do this. High end torque, it's going to do this. So that was kind of step one. They call it DISA, DISA. Then it came to a infinitely variable runner intake. So it's like two concentric almost circles in there with different passageways. You can see it's kind of here. And then as it moves in and out, it changes the volume of this intake, and it can change it pretty much infinitely as it spins the inner section versus the outer section. It's going to change the way the air routes going through there. So it can actuate it and move it back and forth and change the volume of air as it going through. So it's that they call that DIVA. So we had DISA before and we have DIVA now. So kind of interesting how they just it's all this intake stuff, valve train and the intake manifold itself it's all automated, all mechanical, electromechanical going through there. And then another interesting thing that happened is between the US and Europe, they had differing opinions as to when they wanted to standardize on OBD2. So, of course, the US did it first in 1996, and then the Europe was around 2000. So, on some eras of BMW, like 96 to 03 range, you may have both connectors, especially if it's a US market car. You'll have both connectors for sure. So you'll have your regular OBD2 connector under the dash, and then you'll have this round connector underneath the hood. And you do need a special adapter to use that with the vehicle. In some systems, you need to go in vehicle specific. You have to go through this connector, so you need to be able to find that under the hood. It's fairly easy to find, but just be aware that it's going to ask you. The scan tool will ask you what what it has, whether it has a 16 pin underneath, or if you need the 20 pin, it's going to tell you need the BMW adapter to go into the 20 pin with that. So yeah, capable of doing it. It's not quite OBD1. In OBD1, it had this connector as well, but in the 96 to 03 range, it's going to have both the OBD1 connector and the OBD2 connector. And depending on where I need to go and what kind of information I need out of the car, I may need to use this one, or I may be able to use the OBD2. So just so you're aware, if you weren't aware. Now some tips from a tech. So one of our diagnostic reps is a former BMW and Mercedes tech. So I tapped his brain a little bit. He's not too far removed from it. So a few things that he came up with was, well, one, for misfire diagnosis. So due to the DME's logic, so that's the ECU or the engine ECU on the car, if a misfire is detected, it will shut down the entire cylinder. So if it detects a misfire, it's going to shut down the injector and it's going to shut down the coil. Now, why do I need to know that? Well, what happens if I'm going to test it and it's misfiring currently? And I go to test the injector and the injector's dead. Am I going to replace the injector because the injector's not working? Well, the injector's off. The computer shut the injector down. So you need to check it in a different way other than voltage and current. Same thing with the coil. You would have to double check that. And it also can create of course, creates a challenge when diagnosing misfires a traditional way. Also on some of the vehicles. I know, for example, like our 2013 328 that we have for a demo vehicle. There is if you get misfire code, there is a bulletin that directs you, if you find these Bosch coils in there, just replace them all with the Delphi coils. And you see it's kind of metal, and this is more of a plastic or a rubber. So high failure rate apparently on these Bosch coils, and they said just if you even see it, just replace it. Even if it's not currently misfiring at the time, it will be. So just replace it. Also, oil level measurements. Some of the models, not all the models, of course, a lot of the newer models, they have an oil level sensor in the vehicle. So they don't have a dipstick, they have a sensor. So you can't go in and check the dipstick on some of these. You have to actually go through and look at a PID. Now, if I'm looking at data and I'm looking at a data PID and it says I got 22.27 millimeters of oil, is that good or bad? I don't know. What's it supposed to be? Not sure. There may be a spec somewhere. I was kind of hard pressed to find it, but what is full? What is a quart low? Not really sure. 22 millimeters, it's not that big. It's probably about like maybe about an inch or so. That doesn't seem like a lot of oil. That seems kind of low to me. So I don't know what good is, but it makes it kind of hard to check your oil, right? I think there's a way to go through on the digital dash to look at it too as a end user. But as a technician, going in, oh yeah, I got to read the PID in order to see how much oil is there. Also, many of the newer models have an electric water pump on them. And there's some interesting things that can happen with this, and it can cause a misdiagnosis as well. So on these electric water pumps, as you can see, it's got 3 bolts that hold it to the engine. Those are aluminum bolts and bolted to the block. Now, these have a history of not staying tight, backing out, so to say. So it could end up loose, for one thing. And then another thing, if we look electrically at this thing, we got power, we got ground over here, and then we got a couple signal wires. So it's going to get a signal from the computer to tell it to turn on and off and so on. Now, this ground is also using one of those aluminum bolts that has a history of backing out. And that ground is not that far from the actual pump itself. So you may end up diagnosing the pump and saying, well, it's got power and it's got signal. Maybe it's got ground. Maybe it has ground at the time, but it's not working. Or it's intermittently not working. Then you might just say, oh, it needs a pump. But when in actuality, it's just that ground that's fairly close to it. It's like, I think it's like right underneath, you said, that you may inadvertently replace a pump where really it was just that ground right there and the aluminum bolt backed out. So just make sure you double check that bolt, is what I'm saying. All right, now let's talk about some specific scan tool functions on there. It's going to be quite a few because of all of that complex intake systems that they have. So cooling system ventilation, that's important for that electric fuel pump. Bleeds the coolant system. Injector coating, which isn't necessarily specific to BMW, but it is a fairly common repair on there. So there is a code that needs to be done there. Starter exchange. When I change the starter, I need to tell the vehicle that I changed the starter. Otherwise, it may not work. It may not start, and you may think it's an actual problem with the starter or something else when it's actually it just needs to be reset in the system. Startup Valvetronics. So that's when I do any work on the valve train. I need to go in and it needs to go through and do its cycles. Same thing with Valvetronic Limit Learn. And then Vano solenoid valve test. So, of course, that's run on oil. Then we need to run those solenoid valves back and forth to be able to test them to see what's going on there. Oil level adjustment in the transmission. So if I do any work on the transmission at all, we need to go in and we can check the fluid level that way, and we can adjust the fluid level that way using this transmission related test as well. And then some other tests that are in there is the reset starter interlock, which we talked about for replace a starter. Initialize a new headlight driver module and teach in the turn signal. So if I need to replace a turn signal bulb, the car won't know I replaced it until I tell it that I need to replace it. And then also there's some tests in the active sound design module. So that's once again not an exclusive to BMW thing, but it's just kind of one of those weird. It's going to go through and it's going to send noise canceling into the cabin, so it's quiet in the cabin. I would think if I'm buying a BMW myself, I would probably want to hear the engine, but that maybe just me. I guess they'd figured that some of their customers just want to hear nothing. So they have an active sound design module in there that sends out of phase sounds back, so you actually don't hear any noise. So let's go live on the tool, take a look at a few of the features and functions that we can find here. So we got the 2017 X5. That was our representative vehicle for that. So let's just pop into the scanner real quick, look at a couple of these functions that are in here. All right, so we can go into, say, the engine. And we go into functional tests, special functions. You can see we didn't even talk about battery replacement, right? You replace a battery on there. It's not necessarily exclusive to BMW, but if you do replace a battery, you have to go in there and replace the battery in the system. Cooling system ventilation, talked about that. Automated EVAP, tank leakage diagnosis, because that is a vacuum pump. Evaluates battery state of charge. There's that starter exchange we talked about earlier. Injector coding talked about earlier. Startup Valvetronic Limit Learn, Vano solenoid valves, reset adaptations, fuel consumption. A lot of different special functions available in there to test those systems and to set up the systems and to reset and relearn the system. I go to actuator tests. You can see there's quite a few in there as well. You can turn the injectors on and off manually. Electric coolant pump on and off. We talked about that. Blow off valve for the turbocharger if it has it. That sets engine. If we go into transmission, we can see the we should have the oil thing in here. Yeah, oil balancing, right? So the oil level of the automatic gearbox can only be adjusted when the following conditions are met. And then why do I need to adjust the oil level in the transmission in the first place? Are there faults stored in the transmission from oil level check? Mechatronics or converters have been replaced, or parts other than the mechatronics or the converter have been replaced, and then you would go through and it would go through that function. I'm not going to do that because I'm not hooked up to a car. And I think there's one in the body as well. Let's see. First. So reset starter interlock there, right? So we got to go through that. Only carry that out if it's been replaced, one of the modules has been replaced, or if the vehicle's not starting. Also, this procedure may need to be executed if any of these modules have been removed or the vehicle's battery has become discharged. So even if you replace the battery, it considers it discharged at that point because it's disconnected. Or if I remove and replace any of those modules, even just for diagnosis purposes, it may lock out the starter. So I would have to go through there and do that procedure. Once again, not going to do that because I'm not hooked up to a car, but that's very important to know. All right. Let's go and take a look at some of the repair data on this. Okay, so remember, like we said, it's not a huge seller. It's sold a fair amount, 50,000 on average a year. In this case, we have 39,242 repair records for the 3-liter engine. And we can see, common components. That's pretty standard pads and rotors and stuff. Remember, there's a brake pad wear sensor on there too that needs to be fixed. Spark plugs goes along with misfires, right? Valve cover gasket. Been told there's a lot of oil leaks on these things. So valve cover gasket, that's right in there. Air suspension, that seems kind of high in the number 10. Number 1 symptom, though, oil leaks from engine, burning smell down there as well. Engine runs rough. And then the number 1 code for this is EVAP. And then the number 2 one is the thermostat. And then these down here, a couple of these calculate over to EVAP codes as well. These BMW uses 3 different types of codes that you may find in different ways in different areas. So you got your normal P codes. You can also might run into a decimal code, which is what this is. And then you might run into a hexadecimal code, which is just another variant of it. So if I were to go in here and click on that code, no results because it doesn't cross over. Let's see if that one does. Nope. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Let's try that one. Nope. So, but if I go into EVAP and I go into 456 and I go to let's do OEM test procedures, it's going to tell me 456, and then there's also these other codes in there. That's a hex code right there. So sometimes they actually tell you what the cross is in there as well. So you can see there's a hex code right there. So BMW does it a little bit different than everybody else. There are P codes, there are hex codes, and so on and so forth. So sometimes they do cross over. All right, let's go back home. And it's also different engine to engine. So if I wanted to change my engine with a 2-liter, that's it's a hybrid or a mild hybrid at least. So 2,099 repairs, not a ton there. A lot of misfires on that particular one. They're only single times. If we go to engine 4.4, that's going to be a little bit more because that's a little more common, but a little less common, a lot less common than the 3-liter. We can see misfire, EVAP, misfire, a lot of misfires again. A lot of lean codes. Once again, not a ton of them. Engine runs rough. Let's see, spark plugs and coils again. So you're going to see that a lot with those misfires and coils. All right, so that's the X5. Let's do the 3 Series. You're going to find a lot of same functions with the engine just because they share a lot of the similar technology with it, right? So Valvetronic, Vanos, starter exchange, battery replacement, battery state of charge, injector coating again. So all of that's in there. Timing chain test is pretty cool, though. So there is a timing chain test that'll go in there, and it'll tell you whether or not it sees that the timing chain is stretched or something, some other problem in there. So that's kind of nice. It takes a little while, so I'm not going to run through it on this. It takes a few minutes to go through it, but it actually will run it up and run it down and run the solenoids back and forth and stuff. Does it all automatically, and then it gives you a pass-fail result and how much it's off, how much it stretched. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty helpful, I think. All right. Then the same thing for like transmission and things like that. So let's go into our repair information. 328i. Engine, 2 different engine codes. So we'll go with the 2-liter first. 2-liter engine base, 48,000 repairs on that one. Once again, pads and rotors. Spark plug headlight bulb, that's fairly high. Engine cooling system, that's kind of high. Coolant thermostat, that's kind of high. And then if we look over here, thermostat heater control. It's got that electric thermostat, that heated thermostat that can fail. Lean, EVAP. Then we get into like there's a hex code. All right, so that could be a fair number of things. So that's what's that? That is no message from, that's communication code. All right. What's this number 1 code? Oops, that's not thermostat. What's this number? That's another thermostat code. Actually, it looks like it's probably the same thing. We go into OEM testing. Yeah, 597 crosses to a 1D2404. So it just depends on how they accessed it, how it was presented to them coming out of the car. So that's actually their kind of interconnected there. Fluid leaks, runs rough, oil leaks, coolant leaks. A lot of issues with that. And then we see over here it also crosses through as well. So that might even be coming from the scan tool with those. Uh, so that's the 2-liter. Gotta go down here and change my model, my options. Change a different engine. 11,000 repairs. So this is a less common engine on that one. But once again, thermostat heater, thermostat problem, too lean, spark plugs, headlights, things of that nature. So what I like to do too is if I'm thinking of buying a car and it's had a few years of repairs out there out in the field, I'll actually pull up the car I'm considering, or you can pull up your own car and look through here and see what the common problems are. Maybe you nip them in the bud before it happens. And lastly, we'll go into the 7 Series. Pop into the scanner, engine, and special functions. So you see it's fewer special functions than the others. That's not necessarily meaning that we can't do it on that, but it might not necessarily be in this module, or it might not necessarily be equipped with some of these things. Because if I back up here, you'll see it also has an engine slave computer. So we have a master and a slave computer. It's got 2 computers under the hood. Right. And if I go into special functions, there's a few more. Right. So you can see certain functions are controlled in one computer and other functions are controlled in a different computer. Transmission. There's a lot of different transmissions available on that one. Reset learning, oil level adjustments, adaptation values, etc. So a lot of different functions readily available in there for you. And then if we pull this up, and we can see not a very common vehicle, especially the 4.4 is not very common at all. 1,700 repairs in the system. Pads and rotors as usual, batteries, higher pressure sensors, spark plugs, coolant thermostat again, cam timing, mass airflow, EVAP. You can kind of see what the top ones are. Air suspension, number 1 on top lookups for folks actually punching it into the computer. Let's go change the engine on that. So I got to change the model, I think. So that's a 750i. Let's go to 740i. So that's a 3-liter instead of the 4.4. And we can see 1,026 repairs. Once again, only sold 13,000 in the States that year. So that's across all engines. So that might be why. A lot of suspension things, probably with air suspension. So we did the 750, 740, 760. It's a 6-liter. That's only 4 repairs on that one. 6 liters is not very common at all on that particular vehicle. So you can tell there is some stuff that you can do, but that's not a common vehicle on that. That's not a common engine as far as sales wise. So hopefully we got a few tips and tricks and pointers that we can go things to look at with BMW, and hopefully you got a little bit out of that. Hopefully we can join me for our next session, which is going to be same time, same place as always, every Tuesday, 6 and 9 Eastern. If you want to register and join on Zoom, you can go to snapon.com/OT, register for that. Also on YouTube, the 6 p.m. class like we're doing right now, goes to YouTube, youtube.com/snapon diagnostics. Make sure you like and subscribe and all the good things and share. So next week is after the repair reflashing, concluding our after repair series that we've done over the past year and a half or so with that. And it's going to talk about the complexities of reflashing and when you may want to do it, when you may want to maybe have somebody else do it for you. So there are some capabilities and abilities out there for it. So definitely check that out. Also, if you want to see any of our previous topics in this series, we have 83 episodes by the end of the year. We should be hitting a little over 100 episodes by the end of the year. So that's a huge body of work, all available for free for you. All these different topics, they're all about half hour, 40 minutes, give or take, as to what's going on. If you scan that QR code right there, it'll automatically bring you to the page and subscribe you to that. So if you're not already subscribed, you can do that easily enough through that QR code right there. So definitely check that out, on a lunch break or what have you. Get the questions. I got a few comments on YouTube, on Zoom. If you join late and you do have any questions, you can definitely punch those into the Q&A box. I do want to mention my buddy Keith, who also does training. He does scan tool specific training. So Wednesday is on Zeus and Zeus Plus, and Thursday's on Apollo and Triton tool. So he goes through the first hour is going to be set up. Let's make sure your Wi-Fi is working. Let's talk about security link. Talk about quick lookups and things of that nature. Then he goes through code to completion on the scanner functions with fast track intelligent diagnostics. That's about the first hour. Then he takes about a 5-minute break, and then after that comes back with the guided component test functions, scanner scope, all the good stuff with that. Definitely a very thorough class, about an hour and 45 minutes, give or take. Snapon.com/OT is the only way to get it because it's Zoom only with that. So definitely check that out. It's kind of meant to be have the tool in front of you and go back and forth and watch Keith's screen that he shares as you function through on your tool as well. You can get your questions answered, etc. So definitely check that out. Also, I do want to mention I don't have a slide on it because it's been kind of odd this cycle, but I am doing a class 3 different courses on it's the same course 3 different nights on the next software update that's actually been made available this week to if you're a software subscriber. You should be able to download those. They're going to be pushing them to the tool. If you go and request it, you should be able to get it as well. And then next week it's going to be full on, readily available everywhere. So check it out. I'm going to be streaming to YouTube. So youtube.com/Snap-on Diagnostics, 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, and then next Wednesday, and then the following Monday. So it's going to be the same program pretty much 3 weeks in a row on different days. So you can check it out on YouTube. There is a Zoom link on the snapon.com/OT as well. You can go sign up there to check out the software. All right. Claude says excellent information. Thank you, Claude, as always. Thank you for joining as well. So appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you then. Looking on YouTube. So Nick says, thank you for the free training. Can't wait for next week from Snap-on. Nick also says what saved the BMW company was the company that made BMW body kits. Maybe that's so. Could be. Fancy up those BMWs, the wide body kits. Anthony Nofi says, have the session on while driving with my mother-in-law. So noise canceling feature sounds intriguing for driving with his mother-in-law. I think that's a good statement there, Anthony. It depends on your mother-in-law, I suppose, but yeah, definitely could be useful in some of those certain occasions like that. So excellent. So with that, looks like we've cleared the big board on questions, and let's just with that say thank you. Thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with me, learning a little bit more about BMW. If you're not familiar, maybe you picked up some tips and tricks. Hopefully you did. Hopefully you can join me for next week for reflashing. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Oh, I got another question on Zoom. Oh, Claude says thank you. Claude, very welcome. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Have a nice night and take care.